Symmetric encryption algorithms are designed to use the same key for both encryption and decryption. So to be able to perform this type of encryption before the traffic is sent, both sides have to agree on the same secret key. Now, there are different ways that this can be handled. It can be done in different ways, but the point is they have to have that same key before the encryption can actually happen. Now, this is considered to be one of the more traditional forms of cryptography, and the key lengths that we're generally going to see in this case are going to be from 40 to 256 bits, with the 40-bit symmetric encryption being on the weaker side of things these days and less preferred. In most cases, you're going to see AES encryption, which is a symmetric key cipher, and you're going to be seeing that being at 128-bit, 192-bit, or 256-bit. Now, all in all, the way that this works is we have something that we want to encrypt. In this case, we've got some money. We want to send that across, maybe a bank transfer, something along those lines. And so we're going to encrypt that with a key. Now, this key has been pre-agreed upon, so that once we send that ciphertext across the network, it can be decrypted using that exact same key, and we end up with that exact same amount of money. Now, usually these are very fast algorithms, and that's why we use those for wire speed encryption or for data in motion encryption. These are based on simple mathematical operations, and we can use hardware to accelerate the encryption process. We typically see symmetric key encryption in our IPsec technology. One of the difficulties is that we have to manage our keys, and this can be challenging. So one of the most important pieces of a symmetric encryption process is going to be protecting those keys. Sometimes you will hear these referred to as private key encryption. That key is held private, and we encrypt and decrypt with them. But let's talk about the key lengths. Now, with our modern encryption algorithms, as mentioned previously, we're going to see anywhere from 40 to 256 bits. This gives them a range that goes from 2 to the 40th all the way up to 2 to the 256. Now, if you can't really fathom the size of that number, just think it's 1.5 times 10 to the 77th. That's very large, and it would take generally trillions of years to crack that key. The larger the key size, the less vulnerable to brute force attack the encrypted data is going to be. Using 40 bits of a key space is going to be more likely to be broken than a 256-bit key space. So the general recommendation is to use a key that is larger than 80 bits. We can consider those to be a trusted key length. Anything that's lower than 80 bits, we want to avoid that. Those are considered obsolete, and they don't have the strength that we require in our networks today. Now, if we compare symmetric encryption algorithms, we have several to choose from. Of the most popular, we have DES and triple DES. We also have AES, which is newer than DES and triple DES. It's considered the standard today, whereas DES and triple DES for many, many years were considered the standard. DES is a symmetric encryption algorithm that operates in what's known as block mode. What it does is it takes 64 bits of data, a block of 64 bits, and then it uses a 56-bit key length, which is a fixed value, and provides the encryption. Now, in reality, it is a 64-bit key where 8 bits are there for parity, and that's why we say that it is a 56-bit encryption method. So that's a fixed length, and we use those 56 bits to encrypt 64-bit blocks of data. Now, there are two DES standardized block cipher modes. One of them is called ECB, and the other is called CBC. ECB stands for Electronic Codebook Mode, which basically takes each 64-bit block, uses the same 56-bit key, and encrypts them separately. CBC stands for Cipher Block Chaining. We take a 64-bit block of plain text, it gets XORed bitwise with the previous ciphertext block, and then encrypted with that DES key. So it chains those blocks together. Each block is going to depend on the previous block, and so this is typically what we see in our Cisco routers providing DES encryption. By today's standards, the DES encryption method is outdated and it is vulnerable to brute force attacks, so we tend to avoid it. Doesn't mean we don't see it out there in different network environments, but we tend to avoid it these days. Now, triple DES is simply 3 56-bit DES processes. It does an encrypt, a decrypt, and an encrypt. And that's what the acronym 3DES-EDE stands for. Essentially what happens is the message gets encrypted using the first 56-bit key, which we'll call key 1 or K1. The data then gets decrypted using a second 56-bit key, that's known as K2 or key 2. And then we do that one more time, the data gets encrypted using a third 56-bit key, and we call that key 3 or K3. So it's encrypt with one key, decrypt with another, and then encrypt with a third. So effectively the key length is 168 bits, and if K1 and K3 are equal, as several implementations use, then we're really doing only about 112 bits of encryption or of key encryption there. To decrypt the data, obviously, we just want to reverse that process. So for a long time, we knew that DES was going to be outdated and that triple DES would go along with it. And so back in 1997, there was an initiative that was announced to develop the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES. And this was a U.S. government initiative. The U.S. Secretary of Commerce approved the adoption of AES back in May 26th of 2002. Now, AES is an iterated block cipher. What happens is the initial input block and the cipher key undergo several transformation cycles before they produce an output. It's based on the Rijndael cipher, and this specifies variable block sizes and key sizes. But when we talk about AES, the key lengths that we use are going to be 128, 192-bit, or 256 bits. We are going to be encrypting 128-bit blocks with AES. Now, AES was chosen as the replacement for DES and triple DES. It is much stronger than DES, and it is faster than triple DES when it's run on hardware that is similar. So the moral of the story is that in today's networks, our modern encryption standard should be AES. Triple DES and DES are sort of on their way out in terms of popularity and usability because of the level of security that they provide. Now, finally, one other symmetric encryption algorithm that we want to talk about is known as RC4. Now, RC4 is an algorithm that was authored by Ron Rivest. He's been the author of several encryption algorithms, and RC4 is just one of them. This is a stream cipher. We see this deployed in SSL and TLS very commonly. It uses a variable key size, and it runs fairly quickly in software.